So it is my honor to introduce GuidePoint. They've been a longtime supporter of Higher Ground, and they always have a great presentation, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves and take off from here. Thank you.
All right, great. Yeah, thanks so much, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. So first and foremost, my name is Wieczorek, and I am the practice director for our threat and attack simulation team at GuidePoint. So that's the team that does all of our pen testing, red team, social engineering, all of that fun stuff. I have been with GuidePoint for about 2.5 years now, a little over that, and I'm based in Indianapolis, Indiana.
And I'm a senior manager on the same team as Victor. As you mentioned, we do pen testing, social engineering. I'm based out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Our team's kind of spread out all over the place, but we have a good team. And I've been in the industry for about 10 years now. First started as consultant, went blue team for a while. Now I'm back to consulting. So, yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah, so Ed and I are both involved in the hiring process for our team, obviously. So we interview lots and lots of people who are interested in coming on to do red teaming with our company and have a lot of experience both on both sides of the table, but interviewing and interviewees. And we think that there is a distinct lack of confidence and understanding about what the pivotal role that you're about to undertake in terms of that interview is, especially on the part of the interviewee. So, yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, we're going to kind of lay this out in a few different points. One thing that we notice is that a lot of people put emphasis on, I mean, even in Higher Ground talks in previous years, a lot of people put emphasis on being prepared for the interview, being prepared for the questions that the interviewer is going to ask you. But not a lot of people, and I mean, in our experience, when we interview people, not a lot of people ask us questions and ask us about GuidePoint. So we're going to walk through some categories here just to kind of give you guys some ideas of things that you can be asking as you interview through these jobs, just to make sure that the job is the right fit. I mean, you don't want to be looking for another job in 6 months or a year because you find the culture is not a good fit, or it's too fast-paced or too slow-paced, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, we'll hit on a few points and kind of tie it back into the title of the presentation. It's important for you guys to enjoy the stuff that you're doing, just for your own mental well-being. I mean, especially if you're in a remote position, it gets really easy to get wrapped up in work, and it's harder to get away from it because it's right across the house, and you don't leave work at work, and that can kind of weigh on you as you deal with your families and what have you. So it's important to make sure that you're going to be in an environment where that's not going to distract you from your personal life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What you're about to embark on is a professional relationship. So just like any relationship, it's two-sided. And it starts with the interview. A lot of people really fall into this trap of it being 90% the interviewer talking and 10% the interviewee talking. And you know the cadence of that. It's rapid-fire questions, whether it's technical or whether it's culture fit, initial screening, all of that. And then they leave maybe the last 5-10 minutes to, okay, do you have any questions for us? That kind of thing. And, you're kind of put on the spot after being berated with tons of questions about, who are you, your fails, your faults, and all those different things, what you want to do and all that. So just getting you thinking ahead about how you contribute to that relationship, that professional relationship that you're about to embark on, that in essence, you are interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you, because you have a responsibility on at least 50% of that relationship is on your shoulders to sustain. So the whole idea of just understanding your worth and your self-value and taking responsibility and ownership for that half of the relationship.
So the first one we're going to talk about is the culture. Obviously, this one's huge. I like to tie this back to, I don't know if anybody's ever read Malcolm Gladwell, but he makes points about big fish in a small pond. Some people prefer that. Some people prefer being a small fish in a big pond. You don't have a problem being on a giant team for a mega corporation where you're just invisible. You go in, you do your work, you go home, everything's fine. Personally, I prefer to see that my work matters. I want to see tangible results. I want to know that I'm making a difference. I'm making people's lives better. That's very important to me, to have that type of feeling like I'm doing something with my time that's worthwhile. And it's important to know whether or not you're going to get, like, what kind of vibe you're going to get from the company that you're going to, whether or not you're going to get that type of rewarding sense out of it. And I'm getting ahead of us here in the presentation because the next one's going to talk about that too. But a lot of the other things, I mean, in startups, kind of like we are, there's a lot of processes and things that aren't mature. There's not a lot of documented procedures. People just kind of make things up as they go in some cases. That stresses some people out, and they can't handle it. Whereas other people need, like, military type structure. There's a procedure for everything. You just follow the checklist and you do your job and then you leave and you're done. Another one is team communication. Again, this comes into play really big on remote positions. I mean, we're all remote. I mean, I'm in Baton Rouge, she's in Indianapolis. We got people all up and down the East Coast. So we use Slack as a method of communication. It's very important to us that people remain engaged in Slack and that we come to these types of events, because this is probably one of 3 times that we may see each other face to face throughout the year. And that's really important. I mean, you want people to be familiar with the other team members' skill sets. That way, if you need help doing something, if you see something that you're not familiar with, you know who to go to, and those people have a relationship with you. They don't feel comfortable helping you out and doing those types of things. So it's good to ask about those types of kind of interaction dynamics between the people on the team as well.
Yeah, I guess the key here in all these questions, so this first one being, how does each role in the team contribute and communicate? Right, that's not going to unlock all the answers for you, but it's to start that dialogue. It's to have that initial conversation. You're trying to pull out those key points that we listed below in the slide. So you have to be very active in this. You can't just throw that question out there and just hope that the interviewer is going to give you all the information you need. So having that conversation, being very present in that dialogue and trying to pull out all those different pieces could be critical to your career in the future. So the next one is a little bit, I don't know, I think it's interesting. It's how would I contribute to the team, right? And some of these seem like loaded questions, but there's no right answer. It could be very much on an individual level. A lot of people derive, energy and joy out of their work, which is great. Other people, derive that from family or from outside leisure activities or whatever that is. It's a unique answer for every individual person. But certainly this question is to get you or to get the interviewer talking about what that possibility and potential is in that role. So having an idea of being able to come in day to day and tangibly see that needle move, that what you're pushing against, making a difference both maybe inside the team and then for what your ultimate work product is. Like in what we do, we're obviously working to increase the security of our clients, right? So being able to work through and partner with them to see tangible change in their environment after we do a red team or any kind of assessment, coming back the next quarter or the next year, the next engagement, and seeing things improve, not seeing the same things over and over again. That's something that I drive, personal reward from. And that's what that's what you're trying to get from any kind of career, hopefully, is a sense of what makes you feel like showing up every day.
Yeah, I mean, the flip side of that, in a previous job as a consultant, I mean, you go on site, you get domain administrator after a week of hacking different things, and then you go on site to the same client the following year, and the domain administrator that you created for yourself last year is still active and the password hasn't changed. I mean, that's kind of demoralizing. It's like, why did I even come out here to begin with? So, yeah, I mean, that's really important to me. I just want to see that I'm making a difference.
What are the team's most hectic times? Again, you're just trying to uncover what the stresses are in that job. So it could be one of those, like Ed mentioned, where you're a small fish in a big pond. Maybe that's something you're looking for. Maybe your current life objective is something like starting a family, or maybe a side business, or you're getting really good at a sport that you like, or something like that. Maybe you just want a job that has relatively low stress and low responsibility, but you can still improve and find joy out of that. That's great, right? Maybe you're looking for that next challenge, that level up. That's something that you are just crushing 10 hours a day working, and just enjoy that because you want to improve, because you want to get to that next level. Certainly that's an individual decision that the interviewer can't make for you. So, and it's probably not likely to come up in a normal interview. So having a sense of what those hectic times are, something like, in our work, people try to fit in their assessments at the end of the year. After a busy year, they're trying to say, oh man, I got to get my annual pen test done. So, November, December tend to be really hectic times for us, where a lot of people on the team are challenged to do things that at a tempo that's atypical for the rest of the year. So understanding what those potentials are and what those stressors might be helps you, again, understand how you would fit in from that career.
Workload's obviously important. Again, this is kind of striking that work-life balance, making sure that you're making time for your personal life and hobbies and things like that. At the beginning of my career in security, obviously getting into this industry is a very steep learning curve. Kind of have to marry the job if you want to advance really quickly. If not, then that's fine. But recently I've tried to kind of start unplugging, getting away from my computer in the afternoons and doing some woodworking and things like that. So it's good to to have that kind of breakaway and kind of shut off your brain every once in a while. But it's good to ask about that sort of thing. I mean, if you're in the mode where you're just getting in the industry and you want to get your foot in the door and you're willing to put in the time and effort that it takes to go get certifications and just study and be in books and play on Hack the Box and do this and that all the time, then that's great. I mean, everybody, I think, needs to go through that phase in their life, but once you get later on in your career, that may not be the case anymore. And you definitely want to experience burnout, which this can contribute to. Another big thing, especially if you're going into a professional services role, to ask about travel. Some people may not like to travel. Some people like to travel. Some people's spouses like for them to travel. So, I mean, it's good to ask about that sort of thing, because if you've got kids and a wife, like I said, that's a huge lifestyle challenge that you may have to deal with if it becomes too much of a burden over time. And then kind of tying it back into what I mentioned earlier, just doing certifications and what have you, getting an understanding of what it's going to take as far as time commitment outside of your normal business hours, like how much time I'm going to have to spend reading about this, catching up on Twitter, looking at new tools, like breaking down code and writing new scripts and things like that. Everybody has a different threshold for how much they want to accomplish in that regard. So you just kind of have to know what your capabilities and your desires are and make sure you ask questions appropriate with kind of setting that baseline and making sure your expectations align with your potential employer.
Anybody who's been in this business for long enough understands that keeping up with information security is a full-time job in and of itself, right? So that's on top of what your day-to-day is. So understanding that, okay, maybe this point in my life where I don't have a whole lot of outside responsibilities, that's the time I'm really going to put pedal to the metal and understand a new technology or a new technique or become a subject matter expert in some area or something. And these things ebb and flow over time. So understanding how that team reacts to that, how some people might really step up and want to crush that new thing, that new idea, or maybe some people might take a back seat and just do a really good steady job, which is totally fine. That's understandable. It's part of human life. So getting at the root of that conversation and understanding how a team handles that dynamic is incredibly important. We all know that information security can be incredibly competitive, both from a intra perspective and then also inside the team itself. Hopefully that's a healthy competition, one that drives people to be better at what they want to do and just kind of increase that overall skill set. But still, it can be that constant stress can get to you sometimes. So understanding how to take a time out and maybe a break from that while still being a valuable member of the team is incredibly important. And the people who you are talking with about that opportunity should have a good answer about how they address that.
Career trajectories, that may differ depending on what your aspirations are. Like I said, if you're first starting out, you want to hurry up and try to climb up the ladder a little bit really fast. And some people may be coming in the door, they just want to learn at a gradual pace and just kind of, it's a marathon, not a sprint type deal. That's a good idea to ask about that sort of thing, what the expectations are going to be and what your capabilities are. For whatever role you're coming into, where do you go from there? Some people may want to go somewhere from there. Some people may just be happy. I mean, we've got guys on our team that are just happy pen testing all the time. They don't necessarily want to build policies or kind of branch off into writing procedures and doing management type stuff. They just enjoy doing that work, and that's fine. We try to make people happy, and there's a book that our company kind of runs off of called Traction, and it talks about having all the right people in the right seats. And I think it's very important because a lot of people have there's like this unwritten expectation that you join a company and then you're just going to progress from there. There's a lot of jokes about government. If you're not doing your job, they promote you out of that job so you can get further away from screwing stuff up. But I mean, it really depends on what your aspirations are in that regard, and it's good to know what the expectations are, what the opportunities are for growth, and where you can go from there, whether or not it's going to be just a stepping stone or a place where you can build your career.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, starting a career anywhere, whether you're really early on, just out of school, or whether you've been in the industry for a decade already or more, I mean, that's it. being limited to a piece of paper, a resume, and a few hours of interview is a really poor substitute for who you are as a person and what you can contribute to a team. But it's the tools that we have, and unfortunately that's what we're restricted to. So having an understanding of where you're going to come in on that team, and then once those things fall away and the team understands about who you are, what you want to do, what your capabilities are, what your capacity is, then that's where you're really going to see either that movement, or maybe you don't want to. Maybe you want to stay still. Maybe you have some outside commitments, like I keep mentioning, that you want to stay in a role, or you're happy with what you're doing, and that's just where you're content. So understanding not only what your goals in terms of a career are, maybe with that team or in general, and then what the capacity of that team is incredibly important.
And also what the requirements are. I mean, some places have specific certification requirements that you have to get before you get into a certain role and things like that. So, I mean, if your expectation is to get into a specific position at some point, then it's good to know what those requirements are. There's also the opportunity in a lot of places to switch teams internally. So start out doing like something that happens pretty frequently for us is our SOC is growing really fast. So people start out in the SOC and then they move to a different area, a different team of the company. As they kind of build up their skills and get certifications on the side as they're doing their job, it's good to know what those opportunities are as well. In case you really like the company, then you can stay with the company, you just move to a different team doing something that's more interesting to you.
This is a big one for me. This is a big one for me when I came to GuidePoint. Leadership, understanding what their background is. Where did they come from? Do they know the challenges that you faced or that you will face in that role? I keep talking about our specific experience, but my leadership chain when I joined GuidePoint, all the way to the top, all the way to part owner of the company, had been doing pen tests years before. It's someone who I still respect and can still jump on calls with our clients and help explain what SQL injection is. I mean, that's incredible to me. I've worked at professional services companies before who they're salespeople or folks that just are so far detached from the technical delivery of what we do that they have a hard time even understanding that. And maybe that's important, maybe that's something you're looking for, maybe not. Certainly, it could help make your life easier when you're trying to fight for different resources or different ways of doing things. It's a little easier when you have some common ground. So understanding what that leadership background is, and so even if they don't have that the best case scenario where they can talk about walking the walk that you're about to undertake, but at least that they can understand where you're coming from so that you're not fighting tooth and nail for every little thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is also huge for me as well. My first security job, I was reporting to basically a project manager with no technical background, and it was probably the worst job I've ever had. I mean, I got a lot of good experience there, but reporting to them and having them not only not know what the job required and what those pain points were, but having no interest in learning what those things were was incredibly frustrating. So yeah, as Victor mentioned, I mean, we've got partners that have been doing this for several years. They can still hop on report review calls and explain technical vulnerabilities to our clients if we get tied up with a conflict or what have you. And just having somebody in that position that's authorized to spend money and things like that, if we need more licenses for a tool or what have you, we don't have to go to war for it. I mean, we just tell them like, hey, we need this, and they're like, okay, go get it. That makes it a whole lot. It allows you to focus on the things that are more important, like getting work done, writing new automation tools and things like that, instead of having to build up this formal business case that you have to present to a bunch of people to get somebody to loosen the purse strings a little bit. So just makes it a lot easier to get things done, in my opinion. And then the last point there is also big, especially for us, as I mentioned in a remote position, how leadership engages with the team. I mean, a lot of physical, like on-premises type positions, people like to talk about the open door policy, and our management still uses that term, but obviously we're not in the same office as they are, so it's more or less open Slack policy. But we've built relationships with them, and we feel comfortable going to them with problems, and we don't feel like we're going to be attacked if we come with criticism, like, hey, this isn't working, let's change it. It's important to know what that receptiveness is going to be like, whether or not, because in a lot of companies, I mean, a lot of people feel like if they bring negative things to their supervisor, then they're going to turn it around and then attack you, and that makes you feel insecure about bringing negative things to people or providing meaningful feedback that might actually make the organization better. They're giving you that negative response, so you just quit doing it. So, I mean, going back to the reward, like if I want to make the company better, I want to make sure that it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. Like we're going to have to fix problems every once in a while. And having that openness and accessibility is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Growth opportunities talks a little bit about some of the earlier bullets that we had, things about career trajectory, but it's a little bit different because it's not necessarily career oriented. Obviously you have skill sets that you can bring to bear on a cybersecurity degree or a career or something like that, but there are other things outside of that. Work-life balance, anti-burnout, which is huge in our industry. What does the team do to combat that when they see it? We all have dealt with it. Do they offer what's the PTO policy? What's the time off policy? What are some other things the team does to maybe take a break or do some bonding activities, social events, and so on? The things that would help you personally stay away from that whole idea of just getting lost inside the business, doing that work too hard.
Yeah, a big one on this list for me is the technical training aspect. I've unintentionally over the years become a sort of a certification collector. So, I mean, having the ability to take that training and not have to pay for it is a pretty big deal for me. I kind of have to have that carrot on a string at the end of a stick to put myself on a deadline. Okay, I need to finish this by this date. Some people can just open a book and force themselves to read. I can't do that. So having that ability to acquire those training resources, take the training that I need, go to SANS courses or whatever, that's really important as well, to kind of know what the expectations is, because I mean, you're all over you may find a company that has no training budget whatsoever, and any training that you want to take is all of your responsibility. On the flip side of that, a lot of the guys that I used to work with now work for a company in Baton Rouge where they require you to go to a SANS conference every year, and they pay for it, like top to bottom. So, I mean, you have very, very different sides of the spectrum there. So it's good to know kind of what the expectations are to make sure that if they expect you to go to a SANS conference and pass an exam every year, you're prepared to do that. So,
absolutely. So overall, I hope we left you with some questions to ask during your interview to start that dialogue and to make sure that it's a relationship that you are starting to build from day one. That's probably the biggest red flag for me, other than not knowing basic TCP anti-jokes, but things that just indicate that their interviewee is just sitting there kind of passively taking this all in. I think from day one, I want to understand that you're engaged, that you're going to take control of your career and trajectory as much as you can, that you're passionate about who you are, what you can contribute, what your self-worth is. I mean, at the end of the day, we're still in a negative unemployment situation where people who are looking for cybersecurity degrees have a lot of power, right? Again, as we mentioned earlier, this doesn't give you the right to be snobby or to be standoffish, but just hopefully you realize that there's ways for you to be engaged so that as you're looking through this job process, you can build on this relationship for both sides and hopefully find the right fit for you, either whatever team or organization that ends up being.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, whenever we interview people and they don't ask questions, like any questions, it makes me start to wonder, like, okay, are they really interested in this job? Like, are they going to stay here for 6 months? Are they going to stay here for 6 years? Like, that it makes me start asking those questions too. So it's good to at least, if nothing else, demonstrate that you're interested in the position, if you truly are, and to make sure that to reduce conflict later on. I mean, if you walk in knowing what your expectations are, and as long as your expectations match what reality is, then, I mean, you'll be in a good spot.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Does anybody have any questions?